Hi everyone, this presentation on From Evidence to Practice, developing best practice guidelines for the delivery of activities for people living with moderate to advanced dementia. It's going to be presented by myself, Ryan Hughes, the Inactivity and Development Manager at Active Norfolk, which is an active partnership for Norfolk, and Amanda Burke, who's an evaluation researcher at the University of East Anglia.
Yes, hello everyone, and thank you, Ryan. So I'll just start by explaining a little bit about why we did this study. There's quite a bit of evidence about the positive outcomes that physical activity can bring about as you age, including for people with dementia. But little's known about the best way of delivering physical activities for people with moderate to advanced dementia. So there's some evidence or some literature. For example, Harmer and Orrell concluded that residents living with dementia in a care setting found meaning in activities that address their psychological and social needs. So this study is a smaller study and part of a larger evaluation of a project called Mobile Me that delivered physical activity across 50 group homes in Norfolk over a period of 3 years, and that included care settings.
So, as Mandy's mentioned there, the programme was delivered within 50 settings, including care, but also within sheltered housing. And how the project started, it was a universal offer to go and deliver activities, adapted activities for older people to make them as accessible as possible. But what we found as the project evolved was that the delivery became very different dependent on the approach or the setting that we were in. And we learned a great deal from how the project evolved over a 3-year period. So the delivery that we had from week 1 to the delivery we had 3 years later evolved and changed rapidly, or a great deal, I should say. And we had to learn from that as we went along. And we developed up some best practice, or what we felt was best practice, some guides, some tips to adapt and change our delivery. So a nice quote to kind of overview that says that practice that ensured that the sessions were accessible and inclusive, held participants' attention, encouraged positive social interaction and physical activity, and resulted in behaviours or signs consistent with positive well-being. So what we found specifically within care settings is that maybe our primary outcomes on our ways of delivery, looking to try and impact physical well-being at the start in terms of improving people's strengths, balance, flexibility, was maybe not as applicable as in a care setting, which had more of a function around well-being, social interaction, loneliness, mood of euphoria and stuff like that. And we wanted to capture how we could best evidence delivery to demonstrate how you could promote that type of interaction within a setting, because we were visibly seeing that within the sessions that we were delivering, and there were some tips that we thought you could do to enable delivery to kind of evoke a setting that encouraged and influenced upon aspects to do with well-being.
Brilliant. Yeah. So we wanted to build on the best practice that had already been identified over the years, as Ryan's explained, by producing this best practice guidance. And we used 4 sources of evidence to do that. So one of them was the programme evaluation. The other was an observation study. We also looked at the literature, and we put together a consultation group. So I'll tell you a little bit more about the observation. That was, we had an initial pilot, some pilot observation sessions. And following this, we put on 3 physical activity sessions and observed these at different times and in different locations, because one of the things we wanted to have as much variety as possible to try and identify what type of location was best, what time of day, etc. We had one observer using dementia care mapping, or DCM, which is a really structured, detailed type of observation. And the purpose of that was to capture what actions or conditions were associated with observed well-being in a small number of residents. So, for example, when well-being was raised, what was associated with that, the raising of the well-being, or vice versa? So what was the sports coach doing, or what was happening in the room at the point when those residents observed the well-being was raised? The second observer gathered reactions from the whole group. So this was like a semi-structured observation. So they observed the reactions of the whole room and the mood of the whole room. And an important part of the research design that was planned was that the observers were highly experienced in working with people living with dementia in care settings. So the report they wrote drew on that experience.
So there were some key points of learning throughout the duration of the project. One aspect which we learned a lot from was our deliverers. So the people that were working and that were going into the settings to deliver these different types of activity. And they learned a lot on the job as such, in terms of how they had to adapt, what they felt was the right solution for the group to make it as interactive or as beneficial as it possibly could be. As I mentioned earlier, the delivery from week one of when we started to where it was 3 years was very different. And a lot of those adaptations, those tweaks and those changes came from the creativeness of the instructors themselves, thinking about what is going to be the best thing that they can do to evoke a solid delivery session. And we needed to capture that learning and take it in to share, because it would obviously something that we would hope would be of benefit to multiple settings across the whole country if possible. The other aspect, or another aspect of learning that Mandy has already mentioned, is the observation, which really got into the detail of what we were seeing within the session that would warrant best practice. So were we seeing those signs of interaction? When were we seeing them? What made that happen? Was it a room setup? Was it a way of maybe communication, using names, making an interaction of someone having to socialize with a peer in order to take their next shot or something like that? All of these things that were being observed, what was it within them that made the best practice, that kind of got that wow moment, that golden moment of a real positive reaction out of the residents? There was obviously that literature that was there already, and that was a bit of a sounding board for our work, reinforcing the stuff that we're doing, backing it up, or maybe arguing against it, stuff that we could learn from. But there's that literature that is there, and other examples of best practice guidance that we can learn from and can feed into what we're doing. And then there's a consultation group that kind of focused around feedback on what we were doing. Was it going to be valuable? How was it going to be valuable? How could you best disseminate what you were going to do and what we were finding? How were we practically going to make it useful for the health and social care sector to be able to use these type of findings?
Right, so with the findings, I think that the main point that we want to make is about how we through practice and through the observation have identified that the detail of delivery can make all the difference to the quality of the experience. So it's not just about doing the activities, it's about the way you do them. So for example, things like the way you put the seating, you lay out the seating so that people can see, and so that people, the participants, remain engaged and can talk to each other, and it becomes a social experience. The way you adapt activities, things, other lessons were things like the importance of gently people to take part, gently encouraging people to take part over the course of the 10 sessions. Because often people said no to start with and then joined in enthusiastically. And I think there's an element of fear sometimes, sort of performance anxiety. So that was one of the main findings. It was about the importance of the detail of delivery to improve the experience of the participants. We grouped our findings around 4 themes: environment, atmosphere, communication, and adaptations. We identified the outcomes to aim for, and these are largely outcomes identified in our definition of best practice. So that's the quote that Ryan read earlier. And they are engagement, inclusivity, social interaction, personal recognition, increased activity, and improved well-being. The only one we've added is personal recognition, and that came from us identifying the importance of doing things like using people's names, but also about the importance of failure-free competition. And so that's one of the elements that was introduced through doing a type of bowling and keeping scores. And by finding small ways of recognizing success, whether that was people beat their last score or they got a ball in that time. So those were the outcomes we identified. So just finally, our guidance isn't intended to be definitive. We understand that delivery is different in different sites with different providers, in different areas of the country, with different types of people. We understand that. But rather our guidance is what we found out through quite thoroughly looking at how we delivered. And it's intended to be a starting point for anyone who wants to deliver physical activities for people living with moderate to advanced dementia in group settings. So finally, the outputs that we produced, we were initially going to produce written guidance, but the consultation group wisely told us that it would probably be better to produce a video. It would probably be more useful for people in care settings. It could be integrated into training, for example, and a poster. So those are the 2 outputs from this piece of work.
So as Mandy started to mention, we have a few resources. There's an example of the poster that is designed to be able to be put up in care settings as a reminder, as a prompt, as a nudge, to be able to evoke positive delivery, or what we would see as best practice for delivery. So it's kind of a resource that can be a nudge support. There's obviously the video as well, which is available via the link on there, which is designed to almost be like a training video, something that can maybe be built into staff inductions or training days, something that can also be used as a bit of a prompt and a reminder to refresh people around what kind of hints and tips there can be for delivering physical activity for people with moderate to advanced dementia in those settings. And the findings have also been published in a paper, which is available to read online via open access as well. And you can see that there's a prompt in there for where the paper can be accessed from as well.
So we just a little note that we had hoped to include clips from the video in this presentation, but technical difficulties got in our way. But we hope that you take from this is not only our findings in doing this piece of research, but also the process we engaged in to produce the best practice guidance. So thank you very much for listening, and we'll take questions now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.